Hi, Guillermo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Shannon.
Of course. Would you mind introducing yourself to those listening really quick?
Well, I'm a family business advisor, which means that I help families through the process of organizing their governance processes and succession processes. So
Now,
that's the kind of accompaniment.
yes. And now for those listening, you say governance processes. That might be over some people's heads. They may not know exactly what's included in that or think that's something that they don't have to worry about. Could you just define that a little bit further on what exactly you help them with in terms of how they may be seeing it right now or the symptoms they may be feeling in their family business?
Well, that's an important definition of governance. Governance is basically how do we make decisions in an orderly form. That's all about who decides what and when to decide where, the important issues of governing a family business. So most of the families that I work with, or either they don't have any structure to decide who have to make the decision in the high level of the hierarchy of the business, or they are struggling with how to put in order what they have right now. So that's what governance is about.
Yeah. What would you say you encounter a lot with family businesses when you say they're trying to put things in order? What's some of the disarray that you encounter?
Well, family business usually grow in an organic way. We start with a founder that finds a way to make money and start a business, but the way that it grows to an institution that can create value, that delivers a good service, that create a brand, that's a process that takes time. So in that process, many things change from the usual small business to a medium-sized business. And in that process, the complexity is something that appears and things start to get complex and in some cases complicated. So when you start to think in another model of mental structure, that you don't have a small business, you are growing to a big business and there is family involved. For example, maybe your children are helping you or maybe your spouse is helping you. So there is a mixture of roles and you start to confuse your role as a father or mother with the boss role or the production director role. So what we try to help families is to start to think in a mental model of a professionalized organization that can live together as a family without confusing the roles. So that's what usually happens.
And that's so important too, because I see so many family members working with one another. And let me back up to the definition of what you consider a family business, because I've seen some examples where, for example, my husband had a business and his father worked for him and vice versa. You usually think about, oh, the dad or the mom started the business and the kids are working for them, but it can go the other way. The parents can work for them. The grandparents can work for them. You may have aunts, uncles, cousins, right? At what point would you consider it a family business? Just when there's more than one family member working in the same business? What's the definition?
That could be a definition, but usually what we define a family business is when you have a family that is the owner of the majority of the shares of the business. So you can have a sole owner of the majorities of share, but there is an implicit intention of passing the ownership to the next generation. So that's the way that we understand that the family business is. And obviously, all of the situations that you can see, you can have all the scenarios and a composition of ownership that you have mentioned. But usually that you have with a founder that grows a business and pass to the next generation.
Very true. Because it's more about a tool for a legacy, right? So if a family business is kind of a tool for some type of family legacy. Okay. So if that's the case, have you seen, you just mentioned, professionalizing a lot of the interaction and the relationships and making it more clear what the boss relationship versus parent-child relationship is going to have in terms of a dynamic. What have you seen? Have you seen this work both ways, where it makes the business better and the family relationship better to make this more formal?
Absolutely. Because the way what we understand a family business is a system. And it's a system that has three compounds: the ownership, the business, and the family. And whatever happens to one of these subsystems affects the rest of the systems. So it's a systemic view. And you have to understand that approaching to a family business will lead you from one way, but can lead you to another way once you start working with. So if there is an affection if there is something happening in the business, for example, lack of some of the compounds of the chain supply, and that creates a stress in the business that can impact in the relationship in the family, because the responsible of that situation is fighting against the ownership to get the best of the business. And otherwise, I mean, there are things that happen in both ways, and you can see that.
Definitely. You have such a good point there, because everything that happens at home affects the business and vice versa. When you have these kind of lines blurred a little bit, when you work together in a business, or when your family dynamic relies on that business's success, I mean, when things are not going well, it can then permeate into the home and just exacerbate the problem. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And that not necessarily is something that it's a problem if you can manage that in a proper way. I mean, there are family businesses that tend to favor more on the business side than the family side. But there are families that tend to favor more on the family and the business side. And today I cannot say what's the best way. It depends on the culture of the family. For example, when I work with families from Asian culture, they think that the business is for the family, and the family has to take advantage of being an owner. And that's the way that we work. And if you try to convince them that, no, you have to be professionalized and you have to think in the business first, they will say, that's not our culture. We think that we have to take advantage of the business. On the other side, if you work with American or European businesses, they will say the business first. I mean, family doesn't have anything to do here. We are the owners. We need to professionalize. We have to be the farther we are from the business, the better for the business. So it depends. It depends on what you want to do and what's the legacy that you want to deliver to the next generation. And of course, what's the best for the business and the family at the same time.
What would you say are some of the major challenges people come to you facing?
The first of all, I would say, try to set the rules. I mean, as I mentioned before, it's a complex system that you work with. It's not only the family, not only the business, not only the ownership. It's the three systems working together. And that adds a complexity in a single system. When I talk about complexity, I'm not talking about complication. I'm talking about that there is a system with different elements that are interacting constantly. So that adds complexity to the system. So the best way to navigate through all of the obstacle is setting rules. If you have your rules, you will understand what to do in certain cases. And if there are cases that you cannot prevent or you cannot foresee, you need structure for the appropriate forums to talk about this issue and make the right decision. So that's basically what we're trying to face with the families when we start working with them.
What are some of the rules examples? So when you say set the rules, what do you mean?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to set where are you going to decide this. I mean, you need a specific forum, you need a specific room where you are going to call the specific persons that are responsible for the issues that you're going to say. So that's the first rule. Where are we going to decide this, and who is going to decide things? The other one is where are your responsibility as an owner, and where do you have to set the limit on what you can do with the business? So, for example, are you able to take the car of the business and, go to the mountain and have a weekend with your family? That's the kind of rule that we have to set. I mean, for the business, you have to think on its own resources, and for the family, you need resources for the family. But where's the limit in the two ones? And that's basically the kind of rules that we try to set.
Sounds a lot like setting rules, but drawing boundaries of when we're using the resources of the business, how we go about communicating, it's almost like it's rules of the household as well as the business, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because as we mentioned before, it's so natural the way that the business develop and everything is growing. And if the business is a good business, you will see a huge growth. And most of the things that work in the first stages doesn't necessarily have to work in the next stages. So if you are conscious about what's going on, you will understand what's your role. But most of the times it happens so fast that you can easily be stuck in the first stages and still thinking in a small way. So that's what we talk. Okay, let's talk about the rules for this and the next stages in order to have a healthy growth.
Yeah, but I think it's establishing the rules, but I think the most important part is the commitment to following those rules as well and implementing them. Because if you don't have some type of accountability or some type of way to make sure those are being enforced in a way, and I say enforced, you know what I mean? It's just holding it accountable. But if you're not really accountable to following those rules because, hey, it's family and everyone forgives each other,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot more complicated to trust. Not
Yes.
just trust each other. I always say there's an issue of self-trust when you don't keep promises to yourself, that you stop believing your own voice in your head saying you're going to go do something. And it has the same effect on your family too. You have to show that you're reliable and that you're going to follow these rules as well.
Yes, and you have used the right word. How do we enforce that rules? How do you make your brother, or how do you make your daughter to follow the rules? Because yes, we have to follow that. And that's the problem, because most of the rules that we set has more a moral force as a commitment than a legal force. And I have to be clear with that. We don't do anything illegal. We don't go against the law.
Right.
But what we try to do is something that has a moral force. And that's very important, because without moral, you don't have anything. So the kind of commitment that really lasts for a long time is the one that is based in the shared dream. And that means that all of the individuals that are participating in the definition of the purpose of the family business can share a dream of where they want to go. And if you do that exercise and if you do it in the proper way, and you're trying to find the common goal of everybody, you will see that makes sense to them. So once I know where I want to go, what's my role in this road, I can understand the rule, and I know why the rule is there, because that's the best for us and for me. And that makes sense. So I follow the rule because I understand that the rule is good. You don't need any enforcement. You only see
Right.
that let's clarify the things, but you will see that's for good.
Yeah, I mean, not enough businesses do this in general, but I think especially with family businesses, it's less on the table what exactly the goals are for the business and the goals for the individuals and how they view it. Because one thing that I've seen folks struggle with family businesses is you're living dad's dream. You know, it's all about, let's say it's dad who started the business, right? Dad's dream and wants to carry on the legacy. You know, the kids may not have the same passion or have the same why, but if they can connect to their own why, if they can discover their own personal goals and how this business could connect into that, or how it could enable them to reach those goals faster, they'll be more likely to have the same mission and be along for the ride. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because family relationships are long-term relationships. So that makes sense when you share a dream. I mean, we are here together. We are here. You want it or don't. You need to get along with what we are going to do together, including an exit for this relationship, for the professional and commercial relationship. You need to
Right.
define that too. And yes, you can set the rules. You can have a shareholders agreement. You can have a lot of, bylaws that will help you. Fortunately, you can solve that problem. But in order to navigate through the next year and to the coming years, what do we have to do for our family to keep the ownership and transmit a legacy? That's basically what we want to do. I mean, we see that the business, okay, absolutely all of the families we work with, the business is okay. The business is doing very well. The business is not the problem. The problem is the relationship among the owners of the business in a long-term way. So that's why the shared dream makes sense, because you cannot apply that to a business manager or a board that probably next year they are not going to be together anymore. But in family, you have to be together. So setting the long-term goals will help you to go through 1, 2, 3 generations in the future.
Now, if someone's listening who's considering, let's say, bringing more family elements into their business, I know that it's more traditional American, even European, right, to separate the two. Like, don't bring business home to the dinner table. Don't bring personal life into the business environment and so on. And I think we're generally discouraged as a culture in working with family. Like I know folks, oh yeah, don't, oh, you're going to hire your wife, hire your husband. Ooh, like it's risky, right? What struggles have you seen with that? And how do folks overcome the sort of fear of integrating family and business?
I like family working together. I mean, if you make it good in a proper way, that gives you an incredible power. Because if we can set the rules on, for example, what you have mentioned, do we have to talk about business in the dinner table? Is it good? Is it bad? It depends. What are you going to talk about? Are you going to spend the whole dinner talking about business, or just to mention one or two, anecdotes that can help your kids to start thinking about joining the business in an emotional way? And everything that you transfer from the business to the family, it helps you to send a message. And if you understand that the role of your legacy is start with telling stories and transmit that message with a specific goal, you will know what to do on the dinner table. So, for example, I had a client in Central America that they once called me because the third generation doesn't have any idea of the business, because their parents, the second generation, they decide that they will not talk about business in the house because they suffer. The first generation, the parent of this generation, they only talk about the business. So they ban talking about the business.
The other extreme.
That makes sense. I mean, if you are siblings, okay, let's not do that because we don't want our kids to suffer what we suffer. What's the consequence of that? The third generation has no idea. They were not emotionally engaged with the business. So they have no interest. And they call me to make them to get the interest that they couldn't have in the previous stage of the evolution of their professional life. So that's a challenge, because making an emotional connection, that what we need is, if you want to preserve your business for the next generation, this emotional connection must exist. Otherwise, you're going to sell your business. Who wants to have problems? So usually, if you don't do that, you will see that eventually the connection will fade. So that's why we need to start thinking on, yes, we can talk about business in the dinner table, but there must be a goal with that talking. And if you can plan, that would be better.